Hi folks, welcome back to our channel. Bex here today to do my O.W.L.s 2020 wrap-up. This year I set myself the goal of becoming a broom maker, and to do that I had to pass 4 O.W.L.s. Those were arithmancy, charms, herbology, and muggle studies. I had also set myself the goal of reading a 5th book to qualify to become a locomotive train conductor. It was one of those little extra courses, seminar things that you could take this year, new to this year's O.W.L.s experience. So I had 5 books that I wanted to read. I managed to read 4 of them, which is great in a way, but it's also a bit disappointing because I couldn't finish that 5th book. And there's a little bit of a personal story behind this. So if you're not here for personal stories and you just want to know what I thought about the books that I read, I'll put a timestamp in the description box below so you can just jump right to that. But if you like knowing what's going on in people's lives, here's a little tidbit for you. So there was a particular reason that I didn't end up reading that 5th book, and it was because at the beginning of the month, I started to get a really dry eye. My right eye was getting really red. It wasn't that allergy redness, it's that itchy redness. I've had that before. I get seasonal allergies every so often. This was like raw red. It was a little scary to look at, and so I bought myself some over-the-counter drops to try and fight it off, and those were helping a bit, but then my vision started to get blurry in that eye, and it wasn't the type of blurry vision that you can solve by just putting on glasses or contacts. I wear contacts and I have glasses, and it didn't matter how close something was to my face, it was still blurry, and that affected my ability to read. So I was having a lot of trouble reading books. I mean, I work on a computer at home right now because of coronavirus, and even just trying to read the computer screen, I was getting headaches, and it was just really driving me crazy. And because of coronavirus, it was a little tougher to actually get in to see somebody, but I did get to see an optometrist. Everything's okay, like nothing's wrong or damaged or anything, which is obviously what I was afraid was the problem, but it just seems like the blurriness was a side effect of the dry eye that I experienced, and it was so strange because it was only in that one eye. Left eye's been fine, so I was trying to read with one eye, just like doing this, and that's annoying too. Like your brain eventually just doesn't like that either. So that severely affected my reading. So it took me a long time to read some books that wouldn't necessarily have taken me that long. I am doing much better now. Still sticking to the minimal eye makeup. I only have mascara on right now because I didn't want to look like a ghost wearing lipstick in this video. Generally, I love to wear eye makeup. I have a lot of fun doing eye makeup looks, but I've just been like, nothing. So slapped on a little mascara today for this video, but otherwise I've just been trying to let that eye get better, and some days are better than others. Generally it's pretty good, like I don't notice it anymore when I'm reading, but sometimes at the end of the day my eye just feels kind of tired, and so I try not to stress it too much because I don't want to give myself a headache. But yeah, so that's why I didn't read all 5 books. The book that was the obvious cut was Atlantic by Simon Winchester, because this was the book that I was going to read for that extra seminar thing. So this was the one to cut. So unfortunately, didn't read this one. Don't have any thoughts on that one yet. But I did finish the other 4, so I can talk about what I thought about those. The first book that I finished was The Midnight Star by Marie Lu. This was for the arithmancy prompt, which was magical qualities of the number 2, balance opposites. So basically read something that's outside your favorite genre. This is YA fantasy, which is definitely not my favorite genre. This is also the conclusion to the Young Elites trilogy. So by finishing this, I finished off a trilogy, which always feels good. This was a pretty fast read, as some might expect. I read this before the whole eye thing really started to get bad. So I finished this one relatively quickly, and although I can't say too much about the plot itself, I will say that I actually found this to be the most disappointing of the 3 books in this trilogy. I was very impressed by the first book, and the second book, I think I ended up landing on 4 stars. It was almost a 4.5 star for me. There was just some really dark stuff, a lot of gray characters and choices, and you're not quite sure whose side you want to be on. Adelina, who's the main character that you focus on throughout this series, she has a dark journey, and although I did appreciate how this book ended because it went to some dark places, I really felt that this book needed more to it to really give a satisfactory ending. I felt like Marie Lu was building up to this epic conclusion, but there was so many different places that the characters needed to go on that journey that it felt kind of rushed in some spots, and then other spots felt like they took too long. So it was a very weird balance. I guess you could say the pacing was off for me. I'd say if you're looking to read a YA fantasy series and you're not a huge YA fantasy reader, this would be a good option for you. The books aren't particularly long. They're generally pretty fast-paced, but I enjoyed the magic system and how that kind of worked into everything. The world that it's set in, I really liked that, and there were definitely character choices, things the characters decided to do that I really liked how morally gray it could get. Just unfortunately, this one just didn't really end on a good note for me. She did some good stuff in it, but it just didn't satisfy me the way I think I was hoping for it to. So 3 stars. Next, I read Blood at the Root by Patrick Phillips, A Racial Cleansing in America. This is a nonfiction book about a particular county in Georgia in the United States that kept itself basically all white from the early 1900s until the late 1900s, so almost 100 years. This was my read for Charms, which was Lumos Maxima, read a book with a white cover. So yeah, this is pretty generally white. It extends onto the back, so I considered it a white cover. This one I knew was going to be a dark hard read, and it definitely was a dark hard read, especially at the beginning. At the beginning of this book, the author explains why he's writing this story, because he is a white man, and he said that when he was young, his family moved to this county, and he learned from the people that had lived there for a long time sort of the history of why this Forsyth County has been all white for so long. He moved there in the 70s. So at this point, it had already been about 60 years of being a whites-only county. This book breaks down how that happened and how they were able to stay that way for so long. Forsyth County did have a lot of African-American residents at the turn of the 20th century, but what happened was there was a rape and a murder of a white woman, and people in the town decided to blame it on the black residents, and this caused a huge wave of white terror where they would go to black families' homes and scare them, shoot the houses, burn the houses, force them out, and this cleared out everybody. When the book was discussing some of the events earlier on, there was a lot of discussion of lynching, and there were pictures of lynching victims, and because this was a common thing to do, to take pictures after the victim had been lynched, and everybody that was in attendance would sort of pose around the body, and that was really difficult to see, and especially to just turn the page and have those pictures be there. It's not that I hadn't seen pictures of that before, but it's hard to see a lot of it, and I knew that was going to happen with this book. I knew there was going to be parts of it that were going to be really hard to read, but that beginning part was particularly hard because there were pictures and the author was telling the stories of those people. As the book does follow the timeline of starting at the turn of the 20th century and working its way up to almost present day, talking about what happened to eventually turn the tide and the resistance that these people had about, no, we just want to live the way we are, like, we're happy, I don't know why people keep bothering us, and it's, you know, that mentality of whiteness and how those people convince themselves that they weren't being racist, even though they definitely were. It's just, oh God, it's mind-boggling. So this was a very interesting read and a hard read, and it wasn't particularly long either. So if this sounds of any interest to you, I definitely suggest that you pick it up because it's not a huge commitment, but you really do learn a lot. I ended up giving this one 4 stars. Third, I read The Boy Most Likely To by Huntley Fitzpatrick. This was my pick for Muggle Studies, which was to read a book from the perspective of a Muggle, so a contemporary novel, and that's what this is. This is the companion novel to My Life Next Door, which I read last summer and really enjoyed. It was a hard-hitting contemporary. There was some really tough things dealt with. This one takes two side characters from that story and brings them together, Tim and Alice. I liked both of them a lot as side characters in the original book, and I was interested to see where the author was going to take their relationship. And unfortunately, it just didn't quite hit the mark for me. My Life Next Door was a 4-star read, I believe, which is definitely not a rating that I typically give contemporary books, so I was really impressed with that. This one, unfortunately, this was 3 stars and like a very meh 3 stars. 2 stars was too cruel, like it wasn't that bad. But I can't quite articulate what it was, but I think there was just certain plot lines that she decided to write into this book, the direction that she just decided to tell the story. I just wasn't really feeling it. There were a couple times where I enjoyed the events that were happening, or some of the sort of subplots, the B-plots that were happening. I liked those, but I think the main story of Tim and Alice as a couple, there was just so many other things happening around them, because there was continuations of stuff from My Life Next Door built into this book, that I just couldn't really get behind the story and their relationship as a whole. If people were to ask, I would definitely suggest reading the first book, and then I would tell them you can really take or leave this one. The final book that I finished was Men We Reaped by Jesmyn Ward. This was my choice for herbology, which was Mimbless Mimbletonia, which was to read a title that starts with an M, so Men starts with an M. This is another hard-hitting nonfiction book. This is a memoir about 5 men in Jesmyn Ward's life that died all within 4 years of each other. So the book is told in alternating chapters. So she'll have a chapter where she is talking about her life, like starting from when she was young and sort of giving context. And then the other chapter that follows is a chapter about the man in her life that died, and she works backwards. So she starts with the most recent death and works her way back to her brother, who was the first person of these 5 men that died. So you're moving forward in her personal story, but also moving backward to this really pivotal, heartbreaking moment. And she wrote this book very well. It's very unapologetic. I could sense her anger in this book, how mad she was about how society exists in a way that can make life so hard for poor Black people, and especially Black men, and how demoralizing it can be to, you're supposed to be the provider, but you can't hold down a job because the economy where they live didn't really have any options, and how difficult it can be to find a place to live and to be able to keep it, or have a car and keep it in working condition. Just, you know, all these things sort of snowballing to make life that much more difficult, and also how it affects the women in their lives too. When she was telling her stories and the stories of these men, she was not shy about including things that they've done, drugs, smoking weed, drinking a lot. It humanizes them, and I think it also makes you realize that you shouldn't be making excuses for why these men died. I think as human beings, when we hear about the death of someone, especially someone young, because all of these men were young, we try to find a reason to justify why they died. Like one of these men did overdose, and I think that the natural reaction is like, oh, okay, well, you know, he overdosed. That's too bad. And it makes you feel safer, because you're like, well, that can't happen to me because I don't do drugs. I'm not going to overdose. But then other men died because of accidents that were completely out of their control. And that's when you start to be like, oh my gosh, like that could happen to me. That's really scary. And this book, I feel like it's trying to show you that just because these men did do drugs, or they drank a lot, or, you know, they just hung around, it was hard for them to keep down a job, doesn't mean their life was worthless, and it doesn't mean that they deserved to die. At least that's what I took away from it. There was one part where she was talking about her father and telling stories about how her father had pit bulls and he would fight the pit bulls. That made me really uncomfortable to read, and I wish she would have taken a moment to say, you know, now that I look back at it or something, it was wrong. Like, just having dogs trained to fight each other, just, that's not okay. And she was talking about how her dad would do that. So to not have her say anything about that part, I don't know, it didn't sit right with me. All that being said though, this was a fantastic book. It almost moved me to tears at the end, so I decided to give it 4.5 stars. Those are the 4 books that I managed to read for the Owls. If you have any thoughts or comments on those 4 books, definitely leave those down below. I hope if you participated in the Owls Readathon that it went well for you. As always, all of our links are in the down bar. You can go check those out if you feel so inclined. Thank you guys very much for watching, and I'll see you later.